I think it's a great mix that's Chinese music, Chinese elements with jazz, because Chinese music is so focusing on melody, focusing on the line, the feeling and everything. But jazz is more like the chords, the structure, the sound, the harmony. So when jazz and Chinese element or Chinese music mix together, it's perfect. So I think jazz is also in Chinese, and Chinese can mix very well together.
This is why you have been promoting jazz in China for how many years? For how many years already?
Years.
Can you call yourself successful in this effort?
I think so.
You think so? And you think jazz with Chinese elements are being loved by Chinese people?
Yes.
But it's still a niche sort of audience. It's
of course. Because
who are your target listeners? Are they foreigners, or which group of audience is larger, the majority?
Okay, if you asked me this question 10 years ago, I would say mostly foreign audience. But now, since China has been opened up and developing very fast, now I think in China, the listeners are mainly Chinese audience. I think it's because of, well, for example, there's a singing contest like Pop Idol, and the jazz singers also appear into these TV shows. And people start to know the term jazz and start to listen to this type of music. And through this mainstream media, jazz become very popular since then. I think it's around 2012. Jazz start to have larger audience in China, and people start to sing jazz songs or copying singing jazz songs. That's the first step, right? Of course, when I was performing in jazz festivals or jazz clubs in China, I could see their numbers of Chinese audience are growing. Before, they're very international audience, but now I could see 80% of the audience are Chinese.
Is your modified songs, are they well received overseas when you brought them out across the border to other countries, especially into Western countries where jazz originated?
Yes, because when I was performing overseas, I put a program very specially together with Chinese folk music and Shanghai old popular songs, for example, from Shanghai 1920s, 1950s, those songs from the, Chinese jazz early period. It's a mix of those, and then the foreign audience will love that, and they can get a taste of the Chinese folk song, Chinese traditional song. Also, they got a taste of some modern Chinese jazz tunes. I received very well feedback when I was performing overseas.
But most of them didn't have the exposure to the 20th and 30th of Shanghai. They also found the tunes attractive?
Yes. I think it's just like the Western standard, jazz standards. It's around the same period. And then it just gave a lot of Chinese elements. The language itself is Chinese. Like 夜来香, for example. It's such a Chinese melody. Da 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 da. But when it's together play in the jazz style, it's a perfect mix. So the foreign audience, probably they never experienced this, Of course,
but it's something totally new, right?
Something new, even though for us it's old song, so old that we probably don't want to listen to it so many times. But for the Western audience, it's so new, and then it's from 1930s, 40s. Of course, they like to find something and listen to the sound from them, but in the new kind of structure, in the new style,
So for them, mostly it's a curiosity.
Yeah.
And then you once said there's so much that needs to be brought out to, to show the world. Definitely, I agree, because China is so big and we have a rich culture and a long history. You think jazz can be Chinese, but what sort of jazz can be called Chinese jazz?
Chinese jazz can be jazz in Chinese language, and then it can be created by Chinese musicians, Chinese songwriters, and also it can be Chinese elements in there, Chinese folk, Chinese traditional, just mix the culture into the music. And that's what I think is Chinese jazz.
I'm curious, let's talk about, China is so big, and we have so many genres of music and performing arts, and even songs, right? You are from the northeast part of China. You have a very rich family influence of performing art.
That's right.
What sort of job did your parents do?
They were professional Chinese folk dancers. They danced for example, different minority style dances. So they were doing all different kind of style dances from different part of China. So of course they listen to all different music from different part of China. So that also influenced my music taste as well. So when I was a kid, I was watching them perform behind the theater. So when they were practicing in the hall, so I was also listening to the music. So that gave me a lot of memories. But I didn't know at that time that it's going to sit in my heart until later on I was singing jazz. And then I was like, why not take those songs out and then make something new? So that's how I did a lot of Chinese folk songs, also a few in my Chinese jazz album.
So that's why the varieties of music, unbeknownst to yourself, was already deeply rooted in your, as a child, in your mind.
Yes. The songs from Inner Mongolia, the songs from Xinjiang, the songs from Tibet, the songs from Yunnan. Yeah, so there's so many things, so many music styles when, they were performing. So it's a big, big influence to my music style taste.
For 15 years, you have been experimenting on combining Chinese elements into Western jazz, right? American jazz. Looking back, all these years you spent there, have you become one of the quite recognized, established jazz singer in the city?
I think so, yeah. I'm still trying to be better, but I think I've been recognized.
Shanghai is a big city, right? If we count the top jazz singers, like the top 10, are you one of the top 10 or even number one? Where are you?
Well, maybe top 5.
Very good. Yeah, top 5. And this is also why you were invited by a German documentary film director, Uli Go.
Yes.
He invited you to be joining the shooting of a documentary film called As Time Goes By in Shanghai, featuring the old generation of jazz band. I think, unfortunately, when we were discussing this, I think of the respectable old gentlemen, the generation, most of them have already been gone, I think. Time goes by so quickly. So can you talk about this experience? How do you feel when you are singing alone or go to the trip, the whole shooting trip, together with the old generation of jazz bands?
Well, when Uli found me and tell me this project, I was a little bit hesitant because, as I told you, I visited Peace Hotel when I just came to Shanghai. And I knew the music that they made is different than the music I made. So I wasn't sure that if we can blend in together. But the whole idea and also going to North Sea Jazz Festival is really attracted to me. Also, after our first meeting that you can see in the movie, I think those old grandpas are very lovely. They're cute. So at that time, I would just forget about the music. I would like to have the experience with them, to hang out with them, talk with them, to know more about them, to know how they get into jazz and how they studied, how their experience were, which is very unique. So that's how I decided to go on a trip or be part of the movie. And then during shooting the movie, I get to know them, and especially the drummer, Mr. Bao, and Mr. Song, the clarinet player. They have quite experience of learning jazz and playing jazz. For example, Mr. Bao said at that time, of course, there's no school. Not like us. We have internet, we have school, we have all the sources that we can learn jazz so easily. At that time, there's no way to learn jazz. And he probably in his early 20s, he would just go to the nightclub. At that time, nightclub is with jazz band. So he would just go there, and they're full of Filipino band or American band. He would just hiding somewhere and listen to their playing. Just secretly learn how they play the drums. There's no music to read, but you just have to remember it. And the music charts, the music sheets, papers are so precious. In his band, somebody has relatives in the U.S., and they bought it in the U.S. and then brought it back to Shanghai. It's so precious. That's kind of like the gold. So that's the way they learned it. And they talk about when they were young, when they listened to music, how the music, the jazz music, brought them the joy, the happiness. It's so different from us. That was the most precious thing for me and the unique experience for me to join the movie.
Then what have you learned from that experience? I mean, what have you taken away from that trip that you can draw inspiration for your future sort of creation or future performance?
I think it's just in between the young and old. And then during their time, when they were young, they're trying to mix jazz with Chinese music. And then I realized that what I'm doing is continue what they're doing. Is after their footprint. For example, they're playing those songs in a jazz style but in Chinese and filling with Chinese lyrics. Songs from the US brought into China and then filling with Chinese lyrics. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Can you give us an example? A typical song from there.
Give me a kiss. 给我一个吻. That's a song from the US. And 我要你的爱. I want your love. Also a song from the US, but later on filling with Chinese lyrics.
And they played it.
And yeah, I mean, everybody knows it. And of course, they played it as well during their performance in the Peace Hotel. So I just feel like they are the older generation. And I'm continue working in the jazz field, following them, and then, pass them, and then continue the jazz journey.
You feel like an inheritance.
Yes.
You inherited something from the past, and then you
Yes.
continue it. It's like the bloodline, which
Yes.
continues.
Yeah.
Then you were invited by the Hollywood blockbuster film we call it Crazy Rich Asians. And you mentioned the song I Want You. Is that the song?
Yes.
我要你,我要你的爱, right? Something.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
from an old American jazz tune. It's called I Want You, My Baby, right?
Yes.
And the film chose that song as one of the most sort of outstanding theme song of the movie. The idea came from you, or they decided, the director?
Well, this song, I think the director decided himself. And so he asked me if I would like to sing the song and join that scene. But actually, that's right after I joined another earlier scene already. And then they called me back for the second scene, which is the scene that I was singing, I Want Your Love. Then I learned the song. I know the song a long time ago, but I just never sung it. So I learned the song, and then I went to the studio, and I recorded and sent it back to them.
Is it because it was very famous? It's a familiar song by everybody else already.